Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. It's a bright, sunny day out, and Darren and I are on the Ag PhD Field Day site on our own farm here. We just held the Ag PhD Field Day a month ago. We're talking about next year. How do we make this thing better, and what did we learn from this year's event? We had about 9,000 farmers there from 38 different states across the country and many foreign countries as well. So it was a very fun event, and for both Darren and me, we picked up a number of things that day. We're going to talk about it on the show today.
Yeah, there's so many things that you can learn, and that's why I'm excited about next year already. We're already thinking about that. And you know, one of the things for next year that we've got to get right is controlling our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
Just over a year ago, SiriusXM Radio launched the first ag channel. It's rural radio, it's channel 80, and Darren and I were fortunate enough, they asked us to host a daily 1-hour show, actually every weekday. Well, obviously Darren and I have a lot of things going on the farm, but we just decided, you know, this would be a lot of fun. And the reason why we're talking about this in the TV show today is we get emails from all over the country every week, lots of emails, your questions, and we really appreciate your questions. But we just wanted to let you know we do have this live daily call-in show. So you can simply call in. It's 844-44-AG-PhD from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Central every day. We do take phone calls every single day talking about your agronomy issues. So if there's something that pops up on your farm, whether it's weed control, insects, diseases, fertility, you name it, that's what we talk about on Ag PhD Radio every day.
Well, it's not every day. It's every weekday at least. So don't call on Saturday and Sunday. We got to have a little bit of time to do some other things. But, you know, agronomy information is just where we're at, and we want to learn more too. And so sometimes people say, well, it's just a corn and soybean and wheat show, and we do talk about a whole lot of different crops as well. So if you have questions on other crops, we'd love to have them. But there's so many things that are the same. In every form of production agriculture, we're looking at fertility, we're looking at soil conditions, and we spend quite a bit of time talking about how do we improve those things, and that's going to help any crop that we want to raise in our fields.
So over the next few weeks, we do have a number of events that we're going to be at. USB is going to have a large field day in Michigan on August 20th where we're also going to be at the Farm Progress Show for all 3 days. We'll be at Big Iron for the first couple days. We'll be at Husker Harvest Day for day 3 of Husker Harvest. And then during the wintertime, we're at all the Ag PhD winter workshops. So right after each one of the workshops, we take live questions from the audience during the show and answer them on Ag PhD Radio.
Well, we have a lot of fun doing the Ag PhD television program, but we're also enjoying doing the Ag PhD radio program. It's on SiriusXM channel 80. It's the rural radio channel. We're on each day from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Central, each weekday that is, and we would love to have you call into our show. We'll answer your questions live on the air.
Well, one of the questions we get quite often is how do we control this particular weed of the week? We'll tell you how to do it on your farm coming up later in the show.
What's next in weed control technology? Roundup Ready 2 Extend soybeans will provide tolerance to dicamba and glyphosate and will be built on the Genuity Roundup Ready to Yield trait. See them in action at extendfollowafield.com.
It's a humble idea. Use a biological process to turn a plant into a power source. From that idea came the first Poet refinery. One biorefinery in one town turned into 27 facilities in 27 towns, creating new local jobs, producing hundreds of millions of gallons of ethanol, and providing renewable products around the world. Suddenly, that one little idea seems a whole lot bigger. See the world differently with Poet.
The Case IH Summer Sales Event is going on now, meaning you can turn the heat into red-hot savings. That's because all Farmall and Maxim Series tractors, along with our complete line of hay tools, are available with 0% financing for 60 months. But hurry, because while the Summer Sales Event is just warming up, it only lasts until September 30th, 2014. For more information, visit your local Case IH dealer or go to caseih.com/special offers.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
How will you secure your farm for the future? The Quasar Chopping Cornhead from Capello USA will help. Our design is focused on efficiency, longevity, and reducing harvest loss, making the Quasar the corn harvest solution to bring your farm forward. With hundreds of units ready for immediate delivery, secure your farm's future today. Do it for your farm. Do it for them. Order now. Capello USA. Italian craftsmanship, American grit.
A proven herbicide for decades, dicamba can provide burn-down residual control of tough and resistant weeds for up to 14 days. That's another reason why farmers will use dicamba for years to come. Brought to you by Roundup Ready Plus Weed Management Solutions.
One of my favorite things at the Ag PhD Field Day is the Brian versus Darren plot. You know, you hear us talk about stuff all around the year, and you know, we finally get to put it in practice and show, all right, well, here's my idea and here's Brian's idea, and most of the time they're fairly similar, but there are some things we like to do a little bit differently. And then to compare that against, you know, what the standard treatments are, what normally is going on in this area and around the country, I think it's pretty interesting. You know, we saw some big differences this year. We're standing in the wheat plot here, and in the wheat especially, Brian, these plots just stood out versus other treatments that were out here at the field day.
One of the big things that both Darren and I did a little different than what most people would do in wheat, and really in any small grain, is we sprayed fungicide 3 times. Now, a lot of people around the country are spraying in their wheat at that herbicide timing, and we think that's a no-brainer. A lot of people are running a half rate. This year on our farm, we did run a full rate just because we had so much moisture and we thought we had just tremendous yield potential. So either half rate or full rate, just depends on your situation, where you're at, disease potential. Okay, so that's pretty much a no-brainer. Almost every wheat farmer in the country is doing that. But what we also did is we sprayed it flag leaf. That's probably the timing that the fewest number of people actually use, but the flag leaf is the most important leaf to protect on that wheat plant if you want top yield. So we sprayed then. We also sprayed at heading timing, certainly to help prevent head scab, but then also for the late season diseases that can roll in, like rust, even stripe rust potentially, because rust will commonly blow up from the southern United States up into the northern part of the country, and it might hit us anywhere from the flag leaf timing to heading timing. We don't know exactly. So just to make sure that we've got great disease protection all season long, not only do we have the seed treatment on there and the early herbicide timing, but we're also spraying at flag leaf and at heading.
And the important thing to remember here is we're focused on return on investment. And you say, well, man, I don't know very many people that do 3 fungicide applications in wheat. Most of the time it's 1, some of the time it's 2, but that 3rd application, is it really going to pay for you? And you just have to think about, well, how much does that really cost? You know, and if you're going to spend, say, $15 an acre making that 3rd application, well, you've got to get 2 or 3 more bushels just to break even. And that's something you have to weigh out for yourself. This year, it's going to easily be that, and it's probably going to be more like 10 or 15 bushels that we're going to gain with that 3rd application. You know, we did have a little bit of head scab come through our area, and when you look, even in the Brian versus Darren plots here where we did those 3 applications, you'll still see a very low level of fusarium head scab. That stinks that we can't be perfect, but you know, even these great products that we're using, they aren't perfect. They're only going to be 80, 90% control, maybe a little bit better. But when you think about that compared to not treating, it's a huge difference, and we aren't going to have any issue marketing the wheat or anything like that. The level of fusarium in there is so low, it's not going to be even hardly noticeable. But it is definitely noticeable as you walk through the plots and you look where there's only 1 or 2 applications of fungicide made. The wheat here is still, you know, green for another few weeks after the other wheat was ready to harvest.
The other big thing I'd say when we talk about these heading timings is, or the heading timing, is there are multiple fungicides you could use. So Prosaro and Caramba, definitely the best on scab, but for only $2 an acre, you can use generic Folicure that's great on rust, but it's only kind of marginal on scab. So there are different levels depending on how severe you think a disease might be.
Well, you know, this gets us back to last year, because last year I decided I'm going to save some money, and I went with Aureus at heading timing because we were dry and we just weren't getting any rain. There wasn't any rain in the forecast. And I thought, I'm going to save the money, and it didn't come back to bite me last year. Now this year I spent more money. I used Caramba, I think Brian used Persaro in his plot, and we both invested extra money. And it turned out, we had a really wet June, and all of a sudden there was a lot more disease pressure. And it was one of those things where the good thing about fungicides is you don't have to, plan them out 6 months in advance. You can kind of fly, by what the year is bringing you, but you do have to be out there before there's disease. So you can't say, hey, there's head scab now, I'm going to go out and wipe it off my field like you can with weeds, where you see weeds pop up, you can spray them and know that you did the right thing. You've got to gamble just a little bit ahead. You got to be a week or so ahead of when these problems are going to flare up in your wheat. But that was one thing. The fungicide applications made a big difference. The other thing was fertility. We both spread our fertility out. We put on several doses of fertilizer rather than throwing it all out at once. And I just equate it to this. Let's just say you're planning out your day and you say, I'm going to eat some eggs for breakfast, and I'm going to have a sandwich for lunch, and I'm going to have a steak for supper. Well, if you served all three of those things all at 6 a.m., here's all the food you need for the day. How is that going to work out for you? It's not going to work out very well. There's going to be times where you're overfed and can't really deal with it, or your body can't process it, and you're going to have other times where, man, I've kind of burned all that off and now I'm a little bit hungry. We see the same thing in our crops. Whenever we spoon feed our nutrients, it does make a difference, putting low doses out
Well,
at the
yeah, but you
timings
can't
that we need
always say that, because the whole thing is if you're putting fertilizer in the soil, it is getting spoon-fed to some degree when you get moisture. If you're in a dry environment, this is a different deal. So this is where maybe in the dry environment you want to put it all out in front.
I disagree with that.
This is why we have the Brian versus Darren plots, because even for Darren and me, where we've worked with thousands of farmers all over the world helping them get higher yields, we still are going to disagree on some of these things because we don't know the weather. My contention is if I am really in a dry environment,
it's never going to rain again.
On our farm, we've had 3 good weeks of rainfall in the last 2.5 years. That's it. So we just don't know. So this year, we maybe put a little bit more stuff out early because we'd had 2 drought years in a row, hoping that we would get some rainfall. So if you have more consistent rain, I agree with Darren 100%. We want to spoon feed that kind of stuff. And, when we talk about the other plots too, it's not just wheat, but we also did Brian versus Darren in soybeans and in corn. If you look at soybeans, what we do versus what the average farmer does, we're putting a lot more fertility on. We're fertilizing for our soybean crop, and the average farmer in the U.S. is putting very little fertilizer on. So there are just a few things that we try to highlight at our field day that we're doing a little bit different than maybe what the average guy is, and then we're getting a little bit higher yield.
A little bit higher yield?
Well,
It was significant. You look at last year's yield results, and we don't have all the yield results in yet from this year, but last year's yield results, we were 100 bushels more than what the best farmers are doing around us. And that's not to knock anybody, but when we really focus on trying to get the best yield we possibly can, it's something that every one of us as farmers, do you really think you couldn't have gotten another 10 bushels of corn or 10 bushels of soybeans on your farm if you would have put everything into it? And I know that we all think, oh, we're doing the best that we can. And Brad and I kind of say that to ourselves. Oh, we're doing the best we can. No, we're not. All of a sudden we took this plot and we said, I'm going to go right against Brian and we're going to show it to thousands of people. Now I'm really concerned about, wow, I really don't want to look bad in this plot. I really don't want to let my brother beat me. I'm going to do everything I can, and I'm really going to focus on, all right, even though I think I need 200 pounds of fertilizer out there, I don't need that all at once. Like in soybeans, you're going to use 90% of that once you get to R2 or R3. So you're in the reproductive stages, you're in full bloom to first pod. Now 90% of your fertilizer uptake comes after that. So why would I put it all out at planting time? I want to space it out a little bit.
Yeah, but here again, it all depends on what you get for rainfall. And the big thing, just a very quick summary of this Brian versus Darren plot area of our field day. The reason why we do this is we try a lot of new things on small scale so you can see what those things look like. And we talk about that, and we're trying to learn all the time from that. And the things that don't work, obviously, we want to pitch those. But the things that do work, we want to take those on a much bigger scale to our farm and to farms around the country to help you get higher yields. And like Darren said a little earlier, one of the most important things is to focus on return on investment, especially when commodity prices are down a little bit. So this is the big question. All right, we don't have $7 corn anymore. Now what do I need to do? We don't have $15 beans anymore. Now what do I need to do to make sure I'm still getting good yield, but I'm also making some good money?
Well, there are a lot more lessons that we can learn, and that's why we're doing a review of our field day. But first, we have to control the weeds. Weeds like our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Wake up, breakfast is served. Your roots crave P. Most of your applied P gets tied up in the soil, a natural phenomenon known as phosphorus fixation. Fix the problem with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Avail makes more P available to your roots, here, here, and here. Increasing P availability can lead to increased P uptake in the plant. That's more P, and more P. More phosphorus for your crop can mean more results in your bin. An average of 9.6 bushels per acre of corn. Breakfast is served. Supercharge your P with Avail.
We know that the future is liquid. That's why Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers corporate sales force is the best trained, best equipped in the industry. Because our communications, our relationships, our ethics are as strong and as innovative as the products we design. That's why our customers trust us. Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers, helping you grow the future.
For lower cost, higher production, Mandaco Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving and rocks and has contour conformity equaling zero downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted Coulter angles make residue management easier, less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco Agri dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
The world of farming is changing. Titan Machinery and Case IH are here to make sure you're ready. The demands on agriculture keep growing. The challenge for producers is to continue to keep pace. To be successful, you'll need equipment that can get the most out of every inch of land, innovations that help you work faster, and advice from people who know your field as well as they know your equipment. Don't get left behind. Be ready with Case IH and Titan Machinery. Better solutions.
Diversity, in a word. That sums up really the best way to try and manage any of these glyphosate or any of these herbicide-resistant weeds, not just glyphosate-resistant weeds, is using a diverse set of tactics, both with herbicides and culturally, to keep them off balance, to keep those resistance from developing on a field.
All right, so what are the take-homes from our field day site, and what things did we see that really worked or really appeared to be working in the summer? You know, the first thing that jumps out to me is nitrogen stabilizers. As we mentioned, we had a heavy rainfall, really month of June. We got more rain in June of this year than we got last year, the entire year, and in 2012, the entire year. And we used a lot of nitrogen stabilizer in different plots here on the farm. We were focused on products like Instinct and Nutrisphere N and some of these other nitrogen stabilizers. They really stood out. I mean, where guys in our plots used the nitrogen stabilizers versus where we didn't, that stood out to me as a big payback.
Okay, we also had the new Ingenia, basically the dicamba soybeans on our farm. So it's a regulated plot and everything. We had to keep people out of this area. It was interesting and fun to see, but two things stood out to me on that. Number one, that a full pint of Clarity wasn't controlling water hemp that was a foot tall. Now, sure, it was controlling the small water hemp, no problem. But a lot of guys were amazed when they walked through and they saw, well, I thought you sprayed Clarity here. Yeah, we did. At a full pint? Yep. Well, how come the weeds aren't dead? Exactly. So if you think that Clarity is going to be the same thing as going out with Roundup when Roundup first came out, where you could kill great big weeds, think again. And then the other thing along with that is that both Monsanto and BASF are telling people no more ammonium sulfate. If you're going to use ammonium sulfate, it should be just with the straight Roundup or other products. But when you put that ammonium sulfate together with any dicamba product, for some reason, something happens chemically and you get more volatility and possibly even a little bit more drift.
All right, the other thing I took away from that plot, Brian, was with the new Ingenia formulation, and Monsanto will have their own formulation of dicamba they're going to be marketing. But with that Ingenia formulation, we had lentils, we had canola, we had susceptible crops. We didn't have any injury at all in these susceptible crops. They were sitting basically just to the west of where the Ingenia was being sprayed. So I was very happy with that. You know, if we were spraying the old Banville, I wouldn't have been so confident about that vapor drift that could have hurt the crops.
One of the big things I noticed this year, and this comes back to some stuff Darren said earlier in the show about putting nutrients on in a spoon feed or even nitrogen stabilizers. We saw our corn on corn this year in the plots where we didn't have ample early nitrogen, that corn fell behind, in part because we've come off of 2 drought years. So there wasn't a lot of soil moisture unless you had very sufficient nitrogen early on. And keep in mind, in corn on corn, a lot of the bacteria, they're breaking down residue. There's not a good carbon and nitrogen ratio in that corn on corn stubble, that corn on corn residue. So the bacteria are using soil nitrogen in part for food until they get that residue broken down. So we're having major problems with that where we don't apply ample nitrogen early in the season in dry conditions in corn on corn. That stood out to me in this year's field day.
One thing that stood out in corn, soybeans, and wheat is micronutrients. It's interesting to me as I talk to a lot of the high yield growers around the country that were at our field day and guys that call into our radio show regularly. They all talk about micronutrients and how critical they are to so many different processes in the plant. We saw it as we got dry. In the month of July for us, we saw virtually no rain. I thought the plots really separated themselves where we had ample supplies of micronutrients. We had a lot better stress tolerance in the crop. That made a big difference and stood out to me.
One of the other big things that I saw at the field day, and we've talked about this a lot on Ag PhD, is having 3 different modes of action pre-emerge in soybeans because the soybean post products are just not very good. Sure, FlexStar and Cobra and those products can kill some weeds, but if anybody put 3 pre's down in soybeans, we didn't even have to spray a post product and the field was still looking pretty clean. But the fewer number of pre's they put out, so when it dropped to 2 you had more weeds, when it dropped to 1 pre there were a lot more weeds. That was a big deal. There were a lot of great things we picked up from this year's field day. Next year's field day is July 30th, 2015. If you'd like to join us, it's a free event. It'll be a lot of fun and we'll have lots of plots again and a lot of high yield producers there. Well, one of the important things if you want high yield is controlling our weed of the week. We'll talk about it coming up next.
Your time is valuable. That's why you need a Hagie STS application system. Hagie STS products are designed for precision and efficiency, allowing you to make applications all season long with just one machine. Contact your Hagie rep today.
Our weed of the week is Downy Brome. Many people, like me for example, I call this cheat grass. It may not be true cheat, but Downy Brome is an incredibly tough weed. It's a winter annual, and that's why in winter wheat, we've got major problems a lot of times.
Well, there aren't very many control solutions. That's the challenge when you're trying to take a grass out of a grass crop like wheat. And so when you look at Downy Brome control, what we've turned to is the ALS family of chemistry. We've looked at products like Beyond in Clearfield wheat, or we look at Maverick or Outrider or Olympus or PowerFlex. I mean, there's all these choices it seems like, but they're all from that same family of chemistry.
Yeah, the key thing is getting control in the fall. If you wait until spring, by then that Downy Brome is big. It's going to be very difficult to control. So that's why in the fall, you've got to get something done. The Maverick or Outrider is the best. PowerFlex is probably a close second along with Olympus. The advantage that PowerFlex has is it doesn't have nearly as much soil residual, so you can rotate to many other crops the following year, or at least a year and a half later in effect from your fall treatment. But if you're going to use Outrider or Olympus, that's probably not going to work with most rotational crops.
Yeah, and rotation is really the key. If you can rotate to other crops and control the Downy Brome there, I mean, or get a really good burn down. If you get the Downy Brome emerged, then wipe it out with a Roundup burn down, you can do a nice job.
In the spring, our best suggestion is going with Gold Sky or Everest 2.0, but neither one of those is going to be even half as good as spraying one of the good products in the fall.
That's all the time we have for our Weed of the Week, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
What are farmers doing to feed the planet? They're using Quadtrek technology, soil management, and planting systems from Case IH to foster a better growing environment that maximizes yield potential. Visit caseih.com to be ready.
I got a great tip from a high-yield corn producer at our Ag PhD Summer Field Day that ties into grading your planter's performance. I'll discuss it during today's Iron Talk. We've talked about net effective stand before. It means how well did your corn planter do singulating the seed, basically avoiding dropping doubles and triples, as well as how even was your emergence. If a corn plant comes up a week later than the plants on either side of it, it often becomes a weed rather than a viable and productive plant. Back to the field day. One of the corn growers on our high yield panel suggested that you should be in your field as corn plants emerge. Take red flags and mark the plants that emerged the first day, then come back out a day or two later and mark the plants that have emerged since the first time you were there with white flags. Finally, come back out and mark the last plants to emerge with yellow flags. Now, the color of the flags really doesn't matter. The point is that you pay attention throughout the year to the performance of late emerging plants and make adjustments to your planter and to your whole agronomic program to get better emergence. Uneven stands really hurt your overall yield. Since I didn't look at emergence this way on our farm in the spring, I'm out in our fields right now looking at the consistency of our stand and the consistency of the size of the ears. When you see those smaller ears on your corn plants, there's a great chance that it stems back to uneven emergence and an error made either by you or your planter this spring. So get out and walk your cornfields before harvest. Look for unevenness and address it with your residue management system this fall and your planter set up in operation in the spring. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
Get the most from the genetic potential in your crops, reduce plant stress, and increase yield. BioForge upregulates key genes to keep roots growing and reduce ethylene for improved plant stress tolerance. BioForge mixes well with other products for easy application with every pass through the field. BioForge, progressive growers' choice to improve root growth, reduce crop stress, and increase yield. Make every growing day count with BioForge from Stoller, USA.
If you watch Ag PhD TV, you'll love the new Ag PhD radio show each weekday on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80. This is Darren Hefty. On the new Ag PhD radio program, we'll take live callers and provide the agronomic information and brotherly banter you've come to expect from Ag PhD. We'll feature a Back 40 segment where we talk to farmers and agronomists around the country to share what's going on with crop production. And it wouldn't be Ag PhD without addressing a pest of the day. Tune in to the Ag PhD radio show each weekday at 2 p.m. Central on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80.
It's a humble idea. Use a biological process to turn a plant into a power source. From that idea came the first Poet refinery. One biorefinery in one town turned into 27 facilities in 27 towns, creating new local jobs, producing hundreds of millions of gallons of ethanol, and providing renewable products around the world. Suddenly, that one little idea seems a whole lot bigger. See the world differently with Poet.
Dirty work pays. That is if your dirty work includes a Soil Max Gold Digger tile plow. Soil Max tile plows feature zero deflection technology. With the only tile plow factory paired with Ag Leader's IntelliSlope control system, you eliminate the need for grade calculations and lasers. So make your next investment in a Soil Max Gold Digger. Better yield, longer planting and harvest windows, better water management is all yours with Soil Max. Visit soilmax.com.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The all-new S-Cube commercial tender is the only tender on the market with poly tanks, giving you the capability to haul seed, fertilizer, water, or liquid fertilizer. Each cube can hold 300 units of seed, 2,000 gallons of liquid, or 300 cubic feet of fertilizer. Options include full functioning wireless remote, stainless steel conveyors, and self-contained hydraulics. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but for more agronomic information, we invite you to tune in to Sirius XM Channel 80 for the Ag PhD radio show every weekday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Central.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD television program where we'll have another Weed of the Week, a Farm Basics Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Plants actually tell farmers what nutrients they need. They don't do it verbally, but farmers get the information through plant tissue analysis. It's another way farmers practice responsible nutrient management. To learn more, visit rnmf.org.